Charlie!
You know you were her favorite, right?
She wanted me to be a boy.
I didn't let her anywhere near me when I had my son, which is why I gave her my daughter, who she immediately stabbed her hooks into.
I want Grandma.
Oh, what? You're angry with me now?
What about you, Mom? She didn't want to go to the party. So why was she there?
I don't think of Charlie as Annie's daughter so much as I view her as a physical manifestation of the neglected little girl inside Annie, aka her intuition. The events unfolded the way they did specifically because Annie did not heed the voice of this little girl. Charlie specifically stated that she did not want to go to the party, yet Annie insisted she go anyway. And it wasn't out of care for Charlie, it was specifically because she didn't entirely trust Peter. When Charlie makes it a point to tell her, "You're not Grandma," it's not meant as an insult. This is actually a reminder and a warning. Annie's intuition is reaching out to let her know that she should not be afraid of becoming her mother because she is not her mother. She is her own person and master of her own destiny. So if she doesn't want to repeat her mother's mistakes, she has all the power to prevent this. Unfortunately, because Annie hasn't done her shadow work and is still wounded, she interprets this statement from her daughter as disappointment and dismay. Charlie representing the little girl within Annie is why Charlie has the close bond with her grandma. Yes, on the surface level, there is the demonic ulterior motive there, but the symbolism is Annie getting that maternal gratification she never had as a child. At the same time, while there is a maternal relationship that has a level of care that wasn't granted to Annie, the relationship still isn't healthy, so that little girl is still being neglected. Rather than being schooled in the ways of femininity and being celebrated for being a girl, Annie's mother is grooming Charlie to be masculine. This is the significance of having Payman as the summon deity. The book states that Payman is said to have a feminine face but has a very masculine energy, much like Annie. Annie is obviously a woman, but as I said earlier, her mannerisms and energy is masculine. Reading further into the passage, it also mentions that Payman is vengeful if he receives a female host instead of a male one, and I feel like this supports my thesis of the chaos that ensues when women don't nourish their femininity. The masculine energy, Payman, requires a masculine host. Should that masculine energy be in a feminine host, it doesn't work out for the host or the surrounding individuals. This is confirmed not only with the fate of Charlie, but with Annie's fate as well. She is almost able to reverse this fate when she finally reclaims her femininity. The process began when she embraced her own magic and title of a medium, but the signal that had her truly getting back in touch with her femininity was the phone call she had with Steve when he informs her of Peter's feelings that he's being hunted by a demon. She initially goes to Joan because, as I stated, Joan is a mother figure, and what do children typically do when they're feeling emotional? They call for their mothers. Her intuition is heightened at this point because she is now taking the reins of her life. Rather than trying to reclaim what is lost and change what has already happened, she is focusing on the present circumstances, leading her to finally follow the trail of ants that have been there all along. Looking at the scene of her begging Steve to burn the journal, this scene also relates back to what I said about femininity and trusting masculinity. Annie is showing a tremendous amount of trust in Steve, not just through her begging him to save her son, but also through her willingness to put her own fate in his hands. Here, Annie is the most expressive and communicative she's been the entire movie, which also relates back to femininity. But in a cruel twist of fate and irony, Steve no longer trusts Annie. She spent the majority of the movie subtly discarding him, crushing his ego, because men like to and need to be needed, and this causes a rift in what should be a solid bond. He admits to this mistrust when he tells her she looks just like her mother. He no longer identifies her as his wife and mother of his children, no. He sees her as a malevolent and manipulative force to be exercised, just like her mother. Their mistrust towards each other ends up being their own undoing. Steve makes a motion to call the police, and this at face value is him stepping into his masculine responsibility of being the protector of the family. However, I want you to remember that Steve had experienced the occult forces at work firsthand at the seance, even verifying that what he was experiencing was in fact real by him checking the table for parlor tricks. What good would the police be in this situation? This, to me, shows that his motivations for calling them have to do more with his own hubris and wounded ego versus genuine care for Annie, especially considering he seeks to expel the woman he literally made a vow to protect. Then, when it comes to Annie, rather than trusting Steve's actions and judgment, she reverts back to her masculine ways of handling things on her own by taking the initiative to throw the sketchbook into the fire, burning him for the last and final time. I want to rewind to talk about Steve's hubris. Even though his undoing, and by proxy the family's undoing, were cemented in this scene, his misguided confidence started turning the wheels of fate from the very beginning of the movie. Think back to Peter's class discussion of the tragedy of Oedipus and hubris, where they're talking about the main character's ignorance to the signs around him. Steve, throughout the movie, largely maintained a false face. He shoulders the burdens of trying to keep the family together, oftentimes by pretending everything is okay. This begins within the first act, where he lies to Annie about the desecration of her mother's grave. Steve continues this at the dinner table when Peter and Annie have their blow-up. Peter brings up a very valid point, and I, for one, would have loved to hear how Annie defends herself. But instead, Steve ends things right as they were getting started. These well-meaning but misguided actions help to further exacerbate the family issues.
We're stopping this right now. Zach?
I said, stop right now.
Fine.
And then, again, Annie, feeling vulnerable, chooses to flee rather than staying in their company. Having seen all this, it can be interpreted that Steve's undoing is caused by his hubris, as well as a disrespect for the feminine principle. This refers not just to his wife, but also the occult forces, as chaos is feminine in nature, as well as the family's emotions and shadow work. We don't even see Steve show any real, raw emotion until it is too late at his wit's end. Even when his wife is literally begging for the life of herself and her child, he doesn't share her expressiveness. He remains stoic and quietly defeated. Of all the family members, I empathized with Peter and Annie the most, particularly because their relationship reminded me of my own relationship with my mother. I think Hereditary struck a chord with me, not only because I can see myself in Peter and Annie, but also because it made me dive into my mother's shadows, thus indirectly my own, enabling me to, 1, stop idolizing my mother and be honest about my childhood, and 2, unpack why she is the way she is. Understanding that she has her own trauma to heal from helped me heal myself via letting go of festering resentment over a relationship that never was. Earlier, I mentioned accepting things for what they are, but this isn't meant to excuse the awful things that happened. No. The saying, hurt people, does not excuse the horrendous actions people partake in. It's simply an explanation to make it easier to move on. They have their own healing they need to work through, and the way they treat you is a direct projection of how they feel about themselves. There's nothing you can do about that. It's a better use of your energy and time to focus on what you can change, which is your own healing and future. Going back to the first group therapy scene, when Annie is mentioning her mother's life, her words are only in relation to her life as a wife and a mother. When she talks about her father and brother's untimely and gruesome demises, she categorizes those events as being, quote, her mother's life, and 1, this again shows Annie's disassociation from her own trauma, since these are also her father and brother she's talking about, not just her mother's husband and son. And 2, this information only tells a piece of Ellen's story. There's a theory that Ellen first attempted the ritual with her own family, implying that she's been involved in the cult for decades. But that then begs the question of, what was her own upbringing like? The one obvious takeaway from Hereditary and Midsummer is how dangerous cults are. Their malevolence is particularly heinous because they purposely prey on the most vulnerable people, those who are simply looking for companionship, love, and above all, healing. So, what trauma had Ellen endured to finally land her on the steps of the Payman Woman Haters fan club? A huge part of me healing my own mother wounds came from asking my mother and my mother's sister about their upbringing. Even if I don't know every little detail, I learned enough that helped me to contextualize some of my mother's less than desirable personality traits and understand the manifestations of her trauma. That also led to me learning about my grandmother's trauma, granting a deeper understanding of my family's generational curses, enabling me to identify the necessary lessons to prevent repeating the same mistakes. This is the symbolism of the title Hereditary. It's about family trauma, but especially the significance of our relationship with our mothers, the first being we recognize when we're on Earth. That matrilineal link that makes up 99% of our mitochondrial DNA is an incredibly powerful connection. We are, in a sense, with our mother even when she is in her mother's womb, since we, as women, are born with all our eggs. We as women have a responsibility to not only get the best man for the job, and that's whether or not you want kids, and specifically if you actually desire a man, but also having a responsibility to heal and nurture our femininity to be the best mothers for ourselves, as well as our offspring. A friend of mine, Taylor Alina, mentioned the brilliant analogy of comparing trauma to a rabid raccoon. If a rabid raccoon gets into your house, would you leave the doors and windows open so it can be released? Or would you hunker down and close everything, leaving this animal to wreak havoc in your abode? Relating this back to motherhood, repressing trauma will have you, at best, passing it on to your children, or, at worst, taking it out on them. The age of Aquarius is a double-edged sword that has thankfully enlightened many women to the reward of femininity, but for every authentic level-up channel, there are snake oil salesmen and women seething with deception and misogyny. It's important to note that femininity is not a one-size-fits-all template. While there are definitely some things that very much are not feminine, femininity is ultimately about you learning to embrace and love yourself, and thus love being a woman, and learning how to navigate this world so you can get the best that you desire and deserve. I'll end this video with an affirmation that has helped me get to where I am today. So, take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Now repeat after me, out loud or silently. I am safe. I am secure. I am abundant in all. I love myself. You are safe. You are secure. You are abundant in all. I love you. I love myself. Remember these words and keep them with your soul, no matter your emotions, happy or sad. Use them to remind yourself you have all the power over your own life, so long as you believe in that power and believe in yourself. Don't relinquish it to or for anyone nor anything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.